Hey, this is Robert from Mirror Web Project. It's April 26, 2017, and this installment is regarding QuikTest and QuikTest for youth. I know there are a number of you out there, and it seems to be an increasing number, who are using QuikTest for youth. But I have never laid down significant guidelines telling you which one to use when and why. And I think it might help if I very briefly described how and why QuikTest for Youth came into existence. You all know QuikTest has been in existence since 1988. It's been administered thousands and thousands of times. One of our most reliable tools, created under the direction of the chairperson of psychology, Governor State University, on a one-on-one course that I did with him regarding anxiety, depression, and potential for suicide, and the factors that we could extract quickly. That's why we call it QuikTest, to assess where a person is. I very briefly, and I really think I need to give you this background, so very briefly, let me tell you what transpired. I was in a Baptist-type church environment, and a youth pastor had me come and speak to the youth group. He had a Monday Night Live thing that he did every once a month, and it was designed to not only bring together his people, but to bring together kids from the outside. So his normal core group that met on Sundays would invite kids over to cutting edge stuff that related to teenagers on a Monday night, their high school friends or whatever. And he would typically draw between 60 and 80 people at that Monday night event. So I was there a number of times, and then I asked him, I said, do you think it would be possible for me to give them a 37-item assessment? I gave it to him. He looked at it. He said, you know what, this is really not a problem. So one Monday night on a volunteer basis only, and there wasn't anybody who chose not to, they anonymously took the QuikTest assessment. And my ultimate goal was to determine whether or not there was a subgroup of a subscore, which would be kind of complicated because it would involve the figuring of the mean and the standard deviation and a number of other things, looking at a comparison of the mean with the adult group and the standard deviation, and the whole score scatter and everything, to determine whether or not, were these kids different than the adults. My standardized test was for about 3,000 people above the age of 21. That's what I standardized QuikTest on. So I wanted to see just kind of a small group of people, certainly not statistically accurate, although it's over 30. I mean, that's your bottom line, baseline. But I wanted to see, is there a difference? Did it make any sense to these kids? Would the numbers make any sense? First thing I found when I started to analyze it was that I had a bell-shaped curve with these 75, 80 kids, which meant to me initially that we could suspect that this test might have been valid. The results might be valid if we got this bell-shaped curve. That's kind of one of the first things we start to look for, although it's not always necessary. So I did a complete item analysis of this thing. complete score analysis and found out that the scores of these kids were statistically different than the adults. 13 to 18-year-old youth scored statistically different than the adults. Well, now once I get this issue on my hands, how am I going to determine if this was a fluke, if this is true or not? And if it's true, then really you should not be administering QuikTest to youth because the mean and standard deviations are different. These are different. This is a different group. It's a different subgroup, sub-social group. So I was in contact with a number of other churches, two of which were between 12 and 1,500 people, really large youth ministries. So I went to those two groups. They graciously let me administer to these kids. By the time it was over, I had a number of hundred results. What I found is between these three groups, the mean and standard deviation were statistically the same between this first group, second group, third group. In other words, kids were all scoring the same way in three different groups, and they were all scoring differently than the adults. At this point, we've got reason to exclude a group from taking QuikTest. And we've got a reason to exclude a group from taking whatever new test we create. They should take QuikTest. Adults 21 and up fall into that group. They should be taking QuikTest. I'll define this just a little bit more. My standardization group was kids between 13 and 18 years old. That's the age differentiation. But you know, as I thought about it, there's a cultural element there. Are they in that high school type scenario? Now, if this is a 16, 17-year-old high school dropout who's now out working in the world 20, 30, 40 hours a week, living with mom and dad, not in school, not in that teenage environment, where they fall, I don't know. I really don't know, because I didn't test those factors. That would have just been, I would have needed too many people from a selective small group. I wouldn't have been able to find them. So the subgroup that should be taking QuikTest for youth and should not take QuikTest is youth between the ages of 13 and 18, and youth in that age group who are in that cultural high school type educational system, private or public school. Homeschool, I don't know what to tell you. I do not know what to tell you, because having experience with these kids and having experience with adults, I know that there are stressors and other factors that come into play with these kids that adults don't even have a clue about. So the bottom line is, here's your parameter for a QuikTest for youth. 13 to 18 years old. Number one. Number two, in that cultural setting, where they are in a high school, I hate to say the word, but traditional cultural setting. They walk hallways, they go to classes, 6, 7, 8 classes a day. They carry books. They've got friends and enemies in that cultural setting, in that social group, that subgroup that is a city unto itself, that high school, that middle school, whatever it is. The 13-year-olds might still be in middle school. That is the group. I think that particular social setting creates anxieties, especially anxiety, because of what I see with the mean and standard deviation for anxiety. It creates heightened anxiety. And if you give them QuikTest, they're not going to score right. Give them the appropriate test. Ask yourself, where is this kid? Where is this 13 to 18-year-old? It's not really a maturity thing. If they're in that group, if they're in that social subgroup, give them QuikTest for Youth. If they're outside of that group, they're 18 years old, they've left school, they're working full-time, well, now you're probably going to want to give them QuikTest, because they're free of that walking the hallway, staring down people with daggers and talking about so-and-so and passing notes, and all that stuff creates this incredible psychological storm in some people. So be careful who you give this to. Never ever give QuikTest to youth, to an adult. Don't give them both tests and figure, well, you know, I'll look at the results and I'll figure out which one's best, or I'll talk to them about them and say, on this one you got this score, on this one you got this score. No, you can't do that. We just simply cannot do that. You have to give the appropriate test. 13 to 18 years old, and in that culture of school, of classroom type, walking the hallways school. That is QuikTest for Youth. Outside of that setting, and I'm going to say, man, 17 and a half, 18 years old is the minimum age for QuikTest. And they must be out of that high school setting. If they're still in that setting, they got to take QuikTest for Youth. Hope this helps you determine which one to give them, which test to give them. Please don't give them both. That's confusing to you. That's really messy. You cannot give both tests. Use the criteria I've outlined here and give them the right test. I'm sure you're ready to do the right thing. Until later, this is Robert from Merit Web.